All right. Greetings, everyone. I've been away for quite a while, and I apologize for that, but just life and things in general got in the way. But here we are once again, and I'm trying to get a little better at this whole streaming thing. Uh, been doing it on another stream, do YouTube stream with a colleague of mine called Cosmic Pi. You can catch us on YouTube under the UND University of North Dakota. Uh, uh, what do you call it? YouTube channel. Yay! Anyway, I thought I'd kick off starting to do streams again by talking again about some rules and issues that come up in the Hero system, Hero tabletop RPG system. Um, in particular, for tonight's topic, I'm thinking of going over and working with what do you call it? Elemental controls. Now, elemental control is one of three types of groupings that we call power frameworks, and I'll be going over the other two types in another video. But the three types, to give you an overview, are elemental controls, multi powers, and variable power pools. So again, tonight I'm going to work primarily with, or exclusively actually, with elemental controls. You'll have to tune in again another time to get the other two, which I should do another one next Sunday on multi-powers. So diving right in, I will once again I will be working with Hero System 5th Edition, and once again, can't emphasize enough that if you're interested in the system, you really should try it, but you should definitely pick up a copy of Hero Designer, their tool and software for building characters. A lot of people are scared off and scared away from Hero System because it is, as they say, crunchy. There is a lot of math involved and a lot of bookkeeping. And Hero Designer is a software package that Hero System put together that, quite honestly, takes a lot of the fear and the crunchiness out of the system. All you got to really know is how to put things together, which is part of why I'm here, and you can get things done. So I really recommend the system, but if you get interested in it and want to work with it, I definitely suggest that you work with Hero Designer and pick it up as well as some of the books. So I'm going to switch screens here, and pow! I've already got Hero Designer up and running, but the first thing you're going to want to do, or we want to do, is we want to start a new character, and we're using, like I said, 5th edition rules and superheroic, and bam, here's our character. All right, so we're gotten good and started. So we'll come over here to powers, where the power frameworks go, and the first thing to answer is what the heck is an elemental control? Well, an elemental control, at its root, is a grouping of powers that have a very closely knit together special effect. Now, you've heard, probably, I should have said it before, it's been a while, but if I haven't, in his game system, special effect is king. In other words, the power is just as we see over here, an energy blast. All right? But energy blast could be a fire blast, frost, light, so like a laser. The special effect determines what exactly the power is. The energy blast is just the base. And then we worry on about special effects. Is it a fire-based attack? Is it an ice-based attack, etc.? And what an elemental control again is a very tightly knit special effect. Hello, Wondergoon. Nice to see you. And so again, you've got to have a concept of the character. You've got to have a good, firm grip on what you want this character to do, how you want it based, and what that special effect will do. And if you can get a tight group of powers and abilities, you can put them in an elemental control. And this gives you a break on the points, as we'll go over, the point cost of the powers, but it also applies some restrictions. So, continuing on our journey of making up a character, we come up here to Power Frameworks, and you'll see all three of the power frameworks I've mentioned: multi-power, elemental control, or EC, and variable power pool. So we're going to look at elemental control, so POW, and we get a nice pop-up where we get to name our elemental control. We get to set how many points it has in it, and I will stop and go back and go, you can name it as well as EC name. Okay? So those two, I've never really understood why they put two different names in there. I'm not going to lie. Me naming the EC, the elemental control, I'm just going to put that in the name, and it'll be something like fire immolation powers, peregrine falcon powers, something like that. Like I said, it's got to be a fairly tightly knit special effect to fit into an elemental control. So I'm not going to name this one because I'm just going over the rules. I am not going to be sticking with a particular special effect. I'm just going over how you develop them and some of why the restrictions are there or not there or what have you. So again, you name your elemental control, which usually involves something around your special effect. Fire immolation. Okay? Water wall formation, something like that. And then you set how many points you want in the EC. Now, generally speaking, you will have some concept of exactly what powers you're all going to be there. And by the way, Dyson Brulette, thank you for showing up as well. And Classic Daddy. So all of my friends are coming out to lurk. Thank you for showing up. But getting back to the point, the base points, you should be careful setting those because all the powers that go into the elemental control have to have double this number of active points. Go back to a previous video. I went over the difference between active points, base points, and real cost. But whatever points you put into the elemental control here, all the powers that fall under the elemental control have to have double the number of active points. So if I put this up to 15, not 16, all of the powers that go into this elemental control will now need at least 30 active points, or else they can't be in the elemental control. So that's a rule to keep in mind. If you've got some fairly low-powered powers you want in the elemental control, you better keep this at a low point level. If you've got, all your powers are going to be big and mighty, then you want to jack that up a little bit. We can put modifiers. So you can do custom adders, which just add points to it. But to be honest, I've never encountered a situation where I needed to add through an adder powers. So we can add a common modifier. And as you can see, we've got no advantages that show up, but we got limitations. The bottom line is why there is no advantage is because those should go on the individual power. Even though every power in your elemental control may have armor piercing, it should not go on the EC. It should go on the individual powers. So that's why there are no advantages in this pop-up that come up and are listed. All right. Limitations, on the other hand. For instance, if you were doing fire immolations, you might have a limited power, let's see, what is it? There it is. Limited effect. Yeah, limited effect in this case. What I'm thinking of is not in water. Okay, if if it's thunderstorming outside or they've fallen off a boat, Mr. Fire Immolator may not be able to flame on. Okay, so that would be a limited effect, and if he can't flame on, he can't use these powers. So you can put a general limitation on the elemental control, and every power in the elemental control has that limitation. Bottom line, it saves some bookkeeping. It also reduced the cost. So, for instance, if you had a mage who had a magic staff that all his powers came from the staff, I don't know why you would do this, but you could do it. You might put focus on there, and since it's a since it's a staff, we might put it as an obvious accessible focus because it might be able to be targeted and broken, or it might be able to be grabbed and snatched away from them, or something like that. So let's go ahead and put a OAF on it, and let's leave it alone. All right. So our 15 active points now cost us a real cost of 7. And bam. So we're making elemental control. I guess I could go back and name it now. Uh, uh, Eldritch Magic Staff. This is not a tight enough group, by the way, that I would allow this as an elemental control. But I'm again just trying to give us some overview of what we can do. So there's 15 active points in the elemental control. All the powers that go into it have to have at least 30 active points. And here we go. So what's one thing we might want? Well, we might want a force field. He can put up a shield with his staff. So we come here and we click on the force field power, double click on it. We set its PD and ED. So let's just make it 8 for the moment, 8 of each. And now we're going to put on some advantages because it's not nice having your defenses go down in a combat. So maybe we want to put, let's see, reduced endurance. That's what I'm looking for. Reduced endurance over here, half endurance. And bam. And okay, up. And you see we got a warning. Well, you don't see. We got a warning. The active cost of the power is less than the minimum for the EC. So, at power cost, even though it normally wouldn't cost 30 points, the EC treated it as if it cost 30 points. So let's go in and edit it, because it's only 20 active points. Let's put the advantage of hardened on it as well. And so now it's 24 points. So let's jack it on up. Maybe make it 10 and 10. Actually, I'm going to kick it up, make it to illustrate another point. Okay. Each slot, as you might have noticed, in this elemental control, is going to cost 7 points or more. So I've jacked it up. The active points of this power are now 45. So that's more than the 30 that the elemental control requires. So I'm going to hit OK now. And you notice that the cost is now 15 points. Well, where did it get that from? Well, it took the 45 active points of the power. It subtracted the 15 points, active points of the multi-power, so that dropped it to 30, and then it applied the OAF resistance. So 30 divided by 2, that's some of the crunchiness. I actually know it, and being a fairly good math, I know where it's coming from. So there are 45 active points. You subtract the 15 active points in the elemental control, and then you apply any adjustments due to the limitations. which OAF is on everything in this EC. So that came out to 15. So let's do something without any add-ons. So let's give him some flight. So we'll come down here, and I'm looking at active points here. We've got to have at least 30. So let's kick it up to 30. Not 34, not 32, 30. And that should come out to 7 points. And voila. Well, how is it getting 7 points? Once again, we've got 30 active points in the power. We subtract the 15 active points from the that the elemental control has, so that leaves 15 points. And OAF, being a -1 limitation, divides the cost of 2 by 2. So 30 minus 15 is 15. 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. Hero rounds basically down are in favor of the player, so 7.5 rounds to 7. And that's where that point figure comes in. So this is some of the benefits of the EC. It essentially cuts in half the cost of the power. Because the EC, the elemental control, sets up a pool of points that all the other powers in the elemental control draw on. And so that's why it subtracts from the active points of the power. So going to another one, maybe he's got a psionic blast that comes from that power. So that would be an ego attack. So we'll double click on it and pop it up. We've got to have at least 30 active points in it. So that'll be a 3d6 attack. So it should do 30 minus the 15 for the EC. And then divide by 2 because there's a -1 limitation on it. And if that's the case, voila, another 7 points. All right. So, elemental controls basically have the cost of your power because you have to make them at least, or almost half, you have to make them at least twice the active points you put in the elemental control. And then, you add on any advantages. That adds to the active points of it. And so we get like the force field up here, where with the Have Endurance and the Hardened, that brought the cost up to 45 active points. But again, 45 minus 15 is 30. 30 divided by 2 for the OAF limitation. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So, again, you can see some of this crunchiness, but hopefully you also see, again, I can't plug it enough. It really makes this game run much more smoothly, makes character design a lot easier. But Hero Designer took all the crunchiness out. You don't have to know the math of, well, the limitation reduces the cost by taking the active points and dividing it by 1 plus the number of limitation. Yeah, when you say it like that, people's eyes glaze, and nobody is having much fun at the table. Hero Designer makes it where you don't have to worry about that. You just click, you put on the advantages, you put on the limitations, bam, you go with it. If you also notice, it's putting little numbers beside each of the powers in the elemental control. So when you print this character out, it's all going to be in a nice block. And so, what are some of the caveats? What are some of the problems with this? Well, let's say your character was an earth elemental and you wanted them to be particularly tough against physical attacks because they can form a rocky skin. Well, that sounds like armor. So we're going to put armor into our elemental control. And we'll give that 9 and 9. So that should give us 30 points. Nope, 27. There's 30 points. Okay. And we'll put that in there. Or will we? You see, another nice little warning box. By the way, I've got two monitors, and that's why the boxes aren't popping up immediately, and I have to drag them over. Um, we get a warning. Elemental control should not contain abilities that do not cost endurance, barring GM approval. Let's see, just a second, I'll get back to that. Wondergoon puts up a wall of text. Tip, if you know which advantages you want on your powers and add them to the base level of your power. Example, with the force field, you bought 0 endurance on a 1 PD, 1 ED force field, and see what the active points are at, then add additional effects, more PD and ED. You do it this way to avoid going over the active limits set by your GM. Exactly. Um, all of this stuff I'm showing you, you've got to keep in mind the limits of your GM, which gets us back to this warning box. I, as a GM, it's not rule. As you can see by the warning, it's not rules as written, but I will ignore this in a lot of respects. Like in prepping for this, I made an elemental control of Falcon powers. In other words, the character could have flight because falcons can fly, but I also wanted them to have some extra PD to resist what are a maneuver called move throughs and move bys, which when you do a move through, you're actually running into the target and smashing them with your whole body. You're doing a body check. Move by, you're clotheslining them. You're running by them and just taking them out. Both of those do damage to you as well, though. So I wanted the character to have some PD because anybody who knows something about falcons knows they like to dive down on birds and just plow right through them. So I figured that would be a perfect falcon power. And I get this warning box pop up. And I was like, oh crap, that's right. I would have ignored it had you been a player bringing me that character. Wondergoon and others, mileage may vary. Some people are strictly by the rules. The rules say no powers that don't cost no powers that don't cost endurance. Okay, you have to live with that. Myself, I will allow a certain amount of leeway with that regard to that. So be aware and definitely make sure you consult with your GM on power limits and things like that. Because otherwise you're going to run into this and they're going to look at your character and say, no, you have to refigure this. No powers that don't cost endurance in an EC. All right. So, other than this break on the cost of the powers, what are some other benefits or problems with using an EC? Well, one of the other benefits is that all of these powers in this EC can be used at the same time. In other words, this character could turn on that force field at full power and fly at full speed. Okay? This is important because one of the other power frameworks, multi-power, this is not the case. It has its own set of advantages, but you can't use the powers all at once, or you can't use them at full power all at once. With an elemental control, you can. Okay? So that's another of the advantages of using an elemental control over one of the other power frameworks. You can use all the powers at once. This is why a lot of us will make up an elemental control that contains the defensive powers and movement powers of the character. This is a form of min-maxing. Sue me. I'm telling you about it. But it allows you to get that cost break on the character's movement powers and if they're applicable to the elemental control, and on their defensive powers if they're applicable to the elemental control. And so the cost break is nice. The fact that I can use them all at once. So if I had a force field in the EC and flight and let's say even a blast, an energy blasting power, I could use them all at the same time at full power. Okay, that's nice. Um, the thing is multi-powers. Their benefit is, as I will discuss in a future video, they're able to really shave down the cost. So an elemental control helps you with the cost, but it's kind of a middle of the road of the three power frameworks on that. Uh, so keep that in mind. At the same time, you've got some wonderful characters out there that can be described completely by an elemental control. The Human Torch, for example. You know, I mean, you can do him with three powers that all fall into an elemental control. Flight, an energy blast that's a damage shield, and an energy blast. Okay? He actually was able to do a lot more, but some of that was a more experienced Human Torch and everything else. And you can add all that later. So, there we have it. You know, this didn't take anywhere near as long as I thought it might. But that's the bare bones of working with an EC, with an elemental control. It really does. It's really useful for if you've got a character that has a nice, tight concept where everything meshes together, everything comes from this, all the powers come from the same source. They all have a similar, if not the identical special effect. And generally speaking, as a GM, you've just made me happy coming to me with that. You know, if you try to just do what I'm doing here as my example, I'm going to be a little less happy with you because, like I said, an EC should be a tight group of powers, a tight effect. It should not be something just with whatever you want thrown into it. So, once again, that brings up the point. Know your character. Be ready to describe it. Be ready to counter and say, this is why this is here. This is what's going on. This is how I see the character working. I don't know. Unless you've got some questions in my peanut gallery and my chat, I've kind of run out of things to say about the elemental control. Wondergoon, our classic daddy, or Dyson, you may have some other questions or some other comments. So Wondergoon, can you talk about linking powers? Oh, thank you. Yes, linking powers outside of the AC or linking them to powers in a multi-power. The answer to linking powers is in general no. What do I mean by that? There is an advantage. Let's say there's a drain, and I wanted to add a modifier. One of the modifier limitations that you can put on is linked. Where is it? Ah! You see? The software... Nope, there it is. No, that's lockout. The software keeps you from making this mistake. Unusable limitations. Linked. You cannot link an elemental control slot, an elemental control power, to another power. The bottom line is linked gives you a -1/2 limitation, and you're already getting a cost break on the power for it being in the elemental control. Why are you going to be allowed to double dip? If you want to link two powers so that one goes off only when the other one goes off, you need to put them outside of the EC. This applies to a multi-power. You cannot link a multi-power slot to an elemental control slot to a power outside of them. And you're beginning to get a sense for how ridiculous this can be. I have had players literally try to sneak by me that they linked one type of attack to a slot inside of multi-power to a slot inside of elemental control. Now, number one, had I allowed that power, the attack would have been off the chain beyond the limits I had imposed on what the damage, total damage, could be for a single attack. Okay? But number two, It's already in Hero Designer under the unusable limitations. You cannot link a slot in the elemental control. You cannot make it dependent on another power going off. Okay? So, yeah, this is just a no-no. The other power frameworks have a similar no linking rule. And again, it's because you're already getting a point break for using one of these power frameworks. Why on earth would anyone consider letting you double dip and get a further reduction for just because you're going to say, oh, this energy blast only goes off if that energy blast does? Yeah, no. Now, that said, again, with GM approval, you can come in here and create a compound power. Okay? So let me bring up that. I do not recommend for new people to this system to use this ever, but I will go over it. You need some experience, you need some knowledge of how to put things together before you try this trick. But let's say I wanted to link an energy blast and a flash attack. Then I would come in here to compound power and call it flare. And we add, and you see all of the available powers pop up. And so let's put in an energy blast. Make it ED. Let's make it 30 points in and of itself. And we hit OK. And we've got our 3d6 energy blast in the compound power. Okay? Now we come in and we add a flash because it blinds people when it goes off. So let's add another 3d6 flash. And let's make it against the site group. Okay? That adds another 15. And so now the total for this is 45 active points. So from the EC, it's going to be 15 plus 7. Well, it came out to 15 points. So how did that work? Well, we got 45 active points. Okay? We get minus 15 for the elemental control, which brings it down to 30. And then it has the OAF for a minus 1 limitation, which 30 divided by 2 is once again 15. And now you have a flare attack where it hits the target with an energy blast while simultaneously hitting them with a flash attack. And I probably just confused the crap out of everybody who's never worked with this system. And that's why I recommend do not use compound power until you've got a little more feel and sense for the game. Okay? I'm not telling you this out of being a snob. I'm not telling you this out of, don't do it. It's just wrong. I'm just saying the system is still complicated. And you probably want some experience with it before you start trying to mess with some of the extra complications. So that's why I'm saying you can link two powers together essentially by doing a compound you can link two powers together or more in a power framework, but you have to do it by essentially making them the same power. All right? And that is called a compound power. So, yeah, did I answer your question or go in depth enough there, Wondergoon? I will also go ahead while I'm waiting. Okay, he says I did. Good. If there are any other questions out there, by all means, ask them. I don't know who all's watching, but let's see. Enhanced senses. This is in general something that you're not going to be able to put in an elemental control. Like my Peregrine Falcon powers example. Even that elemental control, even with me saying yes, you can put no non-endurance. Um, even if I'm sorry, I'm trying to process too much information at once. Uh, Even if you have a GM that will say yes, you can put zero endurance powers into an elemental control. Enhanced senses in general, like for the Peregrine, you'd need, let's see, where is it? Enhanced perception. Yes, enhanced perception. So this gives you bonuses to notice things, to spot things, because falcons have exceptional eyesight. Well, to get up to 30 points with that, I'm giving plus 10. Uh, if I haven't mentioned this before, let me mention the fact that this system works on an arithmetic scale. So, for instance, range penalties from 0 to 8 meters, you're at no penalty. From 8 to 16 meters, you're at minus 2. From 17, essentially, I guess, to 32, you're at minus 4. 32 to 64. So if you notice there, the brackets double in size for each step. So at plus 10, you're talking about somebody who, can see, half a kilometer, so half a mile away, as if you were standing right in front of them. That's a bit ridiculous and a bit absurd. So there are some powers that no matter whether the GM will allow them in an elemental control or not is irrelevant. They're not going to go there simply because they don't meet the required level of points that have to be in the powers in the slots. So there's things like that go on. Yeah. Um, I think I'm about done with what I can think of to cover on this. Uh, I can say I recommend if you get Hero Designer, you get interested in the system. Again, I highly recommend it. Um, you need to play around with this stuff a little bit. See what things do. Uh, for instance, what these elemental control is doing is a list. So if you want to break between it and the next one, it'll give you this little warning, but you just click, and you see it put a space, a blank line into the listing. You can always go back and add powers by simply clicking on the last power in the list in the elemental control and add in the new power. But you can, like if your character had a multi-power as well, you could come in here and do this. And what I'm trying to show you is that now there's a break because you put this new separator between. So keep that in mind. Play around with this stuff. They have features and mods in it that make it where it's easier to read things and it's easier to work at. And Wondergoon is putting into the chat something that is very pertinent. He put a link to Hero Games where you can pick up Hero Designer and all of the Hero books that are been printed, to my knowledge. You can also get them through other sites like DriveThruRPG. But the Hero Designer software is pretty much through the HeroGames.com website. It costs $25. When you consider how much easier it makes the game run and makes character creation run, it's well worth the $25. Call me prejudiced, but there it is. I really recommend it, especially if you really are interested in getting into this game. And my statement is why wouldn't you? I will quit talking about elemental controls to toot Hero Games system here for a little bit. It can it's the best generic system I've ever played. You can play any genre, space, star heroes, James Bond type heroes, fantasy, superheroes, all of it, and it all works in a nice, compact, comprehensive system. I'd say compact. You're going to see the book. The fifth edition rule book is that thick. Yeah. So it can be a little daunting. It's over 400 or 500 pages, but a lot of it, the bulk in that is sidebars and explanations about why things work and how things work and the game balance considerations. So don't let it scare you. It's a really good system. It's really nice. It's fun to play with. And I think I'm going to call this a stream and bid y'all a good evening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching this on VOD, thank you for watching. And I look forward to bringing you a new stream on multi-powers next week. That's the plan anyway. And we'll see you then. Have a good evening, everybody.